No Dreamcoat today. It's just this very loud Hawaiian shirt that I have. Hi, my name is Kendall Bryan Hunter, and I'm the author of Consider My Servant Job, and this is Come Follow Me, Get to the Point, where I always show up. I never come unprepared. We never take roll, and it's bring your own refreshments. And I tried to get through the Come Follow Me lesson rather quickly. So let's begin. So this is Joseph. And one of the problems with talking about Joseph is that we've heard the story so many times. Thank you, Donny Osmond. That it gets a little bit old telling the story because we've heard it all before, and it's hard to bring something new and fresh to it. It's kind of like where you have the same Mother's Day talk where I always quote about the Sons of Helaman, and it's just sort of repetitious. So I'll try and do the best I can today. So Joseph, I think the first thing to talk about is with Joseph is that he's a dreamer. He has a gift of dreams, and as we read through this, you're actually going to understand the process of getting divine dreams, inspired dreams, how you get them, how you interpret them, and once you interpret them, how you act upon them. So pay attention to that. Um, Now, I'm reminded of this quote from Wilford Woodruff. He made the comment that he had dreams and he's guided by dreams. He also said, not all dreams are inspired. And that's one of the things to pay attention to is that someone says they have a dream, but just maybe something else. That's kind of the thing I like about the church is that when you read Sigmund Freud, you always thought it was just wish fulfillment, but the church says, yeah, sometimes it's just a normal processing thing of your brain, but sometimes you're getting communication, so it's a little bit closer to Carl Jung than Sigmund Freud, but that's getting a little bit off topic because we were talking about Joseph and not discuss psychology, and I'm not trained in psychology. So first thing you notice is sibling rivalry is that this is a pattern in the scriptures where children just don't get along, and it gives a breath of validity and truth to what you're reading in the scripture. This is actually real people experiencing stuff. This isn't a piece of fiction or stylized. You think about Laman and Lemuel and Nephi in the Book of Mormon, how there is just a lot of contention and back and forth, and you have the same thing here with the Jacob and Esau, and now with all the children together, just kind of dogpiling on each other. It's a very large family with two wives and then two concubines, so a lot of kids running around, and just a lot of contention. And Joseph, during this mix, Joseph starts developing this talent of getting dreams, and it causes problems. That the brothers kind of, hey, wait a minute, you're getting a little bit too big for your britches. Just why don't you just shut up and no, we're not going to bow down to you. The dream of the sheaves, and later the dream of the stars with the sun and the moon. However, to Jacob's credit, he honors the dream that his son had, and he respects it in the same way that Lehi honored Nephi. How when Lehi started complaining, Nephi turned to the Lord and was able to quell things. And you see this disruptive pattern there that we have primogeniture and children needing to honor their fathers and mothers, but sometimes the kids are the ones that in the right place. And you always pay attention to that in families where just because you're in charge doesn't necessarily mean that you're in the right all the time. You just be respectful to what's going on there. Another thing to think about is with Joseph Smith Sr., how his son, who wasn't the oldest son, he's a little bit down the telephone pole, was the one who was called to be a prophet, and even Joseph Smith Sr. had to respect the prophetic mantle that his son Joseph Smith Jr. had, even though they all kind of knew about it. That Joseph Smith was called. There's still sort of this family friction that goes on. So let's go to the conspiracy. That you had a conspiracy a little bit like Abel. So they take Joseph, throw him, just to get rid of him. The first thing is they take Joseph, throw him in a pit, and say, let's kill him. And please remember that you're reading something from a different culture, that we don't do that nowadays. But back in this culture, they did stuff like that. And we're not endorsing it. We don't the Bible's telling us to do stuff like that, but we're just kind of seeing this is a different culture with a different set of rules, and how when people start following the gospel, it's able to change the culture. So the first thing is we want to kill Joseph. Reuben comes along and says, okay, let's just imprison him, keep him there, kind of jerk him around, kind of like lock him in the trunk for about an hour, or lock him in the closet, and then we'll just let him out to put him in his place. Well, Reuben leaves. What happens? They see the Midianites come by and say, hey, let's sell Joseph to him. Let's make some money off of him. Again, this isn't Mayberry. This isn't the Andy Griffith Show. this isn't even as bad. This isn't even Gotham City and Batman. This is just really kind of a very alien culture to us that they do that to their brothers, and it kind of harkens back to with Laman and Lemuel, how they tied up Nephi and just let him to die. That's how things worked back then. So always be sensitive to the cultural differences, and that we're not imposing our culture and our sensibilities upon people in the Old Testament. Okay, so let's go to point 4. We're kind of zooming along here. The coat. It's a coat of many colors, is one way to translate. Another one, it's a coat with long sleeves. However you interpret it, it was a coat that set him apart and showed that his father's favoritism to him. And that's another issue along with sibling rivalry, is the favoritism. Now, there's the, I talked about this a little bit in a previous video. Let me throw it in here because it kind of fits in, is that about the coat and the nature of it, is that Adam, when Adam and Eve were cast out, Adam was given a garment of animal skins. And the legend is that this garment was handed down and ended up in Noah's hands. And you have the issue with Noah being drunk and then seeing his nakedness, which ties into that legend. And later the legend is that Nimrod ended up with the garment and made him a mighty hunter. So I don't know how accurate that is, but that's just what the legend is. But there's always a little bit more going on here that we don't have the full story to, but there's something with the cult. This may have been a symbol of his of Joseph being the chosen one, along with his obvious spiritual gifts. But there's also something too in the Book of Mormon, is that Joseph's coats get referenced, and this is in Alma 46 verse, I think it's verse 24, if I kind of scrolled it a little bit there, is that what happened is that part of the coat decayed and part of it didn't, and that was a prophetic thing, is that as part of the house of Israel would decay, but part of it would still stay permanent. And it's tied in with the Book of Mormon, and Captain Moroni references that. So you go back there and read the reference to get a full story, and that's an interesting tradition that's nowhere in the Bible. It's something that was lost, but it was preserved in the Book of Mormon. So that's the coat for you, and then they put it in goat, the goat's blood, and like I said, we're all kind of familiar with the story now, but so I'm kind of skipping over that. Another thing, speaking of skipping over stuff, I'll skip over with the issue of Judah and the harlot. That's kind of secondary thing we don't need to cover here, because like I said, I'm being more on topic, trying to get the most important things, and that's a bit of a side story, although it does play in the narrative. So Joseph is in Egypt, and why Egypt? Well, one, it's very isolated. Two, because of the Nile, it's very fertile, and that's why it had such a stable culture over time. It was isolated and very fertile, a little bit like how China has been very stable over thousands and thousands of years. Another thing, too, is to think about is how climate change is working in the Old Testament, how you're reading about droughts and winds and a lot of stuff that happens post-flood, that there's something happened with the Earth's ecosystem. So you always have changes in climates and such that's getting mentioned in the Book of Mormon. It's a little bit of a background thing. It's like what happened with the land of desolation in the Book of Mormon, that cut down all the trees, and it created the deforestation, created a problem there, so they had to switch to cement. They tried to reforest it. So that's like I said, that's something that you read about in the scriptures. Like I said, I'm not endorsing any piece of legislation here or any political party. I'm just saying this is what we're reading here. Now, point 56b, Joseph, he becomes Potiphar's slave, and he becomes the overseer of the household. And that kind of tells you the talents that he had, that he was able to spot this is a very good person. You kind of see that with people. You know who's working, you know who's leaning up against the wall. You have the incident with Potiphar's wife. Now, one thing, this is another thing coming from the legends, is that, and this is actually indirectly backed up by the scriptures, is that you have Joseph was really physically attractive. If you remember his mother, Rachel, she was also physically attractive. He was a bit of a Superman. He had these dreams. He was physically attractive and very organized. He was like something really heroic. And so this may have been part of what was turning on Potiphar's wife, is that he's just really good looking. In fact, there's this funny story, is that you had a bunch of the servant girls were in the kitchen, and they were peeling lemons or something. And Joseph came into the room, and they were just just smitten by him. They're so busy staring on, they actually end up accidentally cutting their hands while they're cutting the oranges. That's a funny, that's something from the book of Jasher. But it's a funny story, but it kind of gives you the thing, is that he's so good looking that the ladies are just all crazy over him. Another thing, too, is remember that Potiphar's wife was doing this over time. This just wasn't a heat of the moment type thing, and she's very, very persistent with it, and he kept pushing her away. And so you had the situation where things came to a head, where he she approached him, and he had to say, no, I can't sin against God. So he ran, and what happened is that she grabbed his robe, and so he's we don't know exactly what it was in Greek. The terms for naked and for being nearly clothesless are kind of the same words. And but even though this is written in Hebrew, also too it's Egypt, so it's a hot climate, so you're not wearing a whole lot of clothes like you do in Alaska. But Potiphar's wife was left holding the robe, and she used it as evidence. And there's another legend about this is that what happened is that some of the other people that are involved with Potiphar, they made the observation, like, well, look, if Joseph was telling the truth that the wife came onto him, his robe would have been ripped in the front because she's coming up to him and ripped it out. However, if Potiphar's wife was telling the truth, as Joseph was running away, there would be a rip in the back of his clothes because he's running away and she's grabbing it as he is running away. So they looked at the robe, and the rip was in the front of the robe. And so it was, they kind of said, okay, yeah, Joseph was telling the truth. Another thing to think of is that Potiphar sends Joseph to prison. Remember, Joseph was a slave. Potiphar could have killed him if he wanted to. He didn't. He sent him to prison. That kind of another evidence that Potiphar kind of knew what was going on with his wife, and that he also really liked Joseph because, like I said, killing him was an option. It would have protected the dignity of his wife and the household. But he kept him alive and said, okay, let's put him, you have to do things for appearances. But he kept Joseph alive. And that's another thing with the guiding providence. So Joseph ends up in prison. And true to form, he's able to rise to the top. And that's something to think about, the ability to be resilient, to bounce back, that keep going forward despite your setbacks. That's an important lesson, because as he's being resilient and responding to the things, Joseph was learning things about administration and leadership that was very important later on. You have the normal inherent gifts and talents that he had, his organizations, but he also needed to learn stuff through practice. It just wasn't suddenly he had these abilities there, although that does happen from time to time, but he had to learn stuff, and he was learning it in prison. More dreaming. You have the baker and the butler had the two different dreams. And again, as you pay attention to the dreams, you understand how when God sends dream, there's a certain element or pattern there with the three elements, the three with the 3 loaves of bread and the 3 vines, I think is what it was, that there's a way to understand dreams. And as you read the inspired dreams in the scriptures, and also, like, especially in the Book of Mormon with Lehi's dream, which is probably the most complex dream we have recorded in the scriptures, with so many elements in there, that and also the interpretations, which is very helpful. You understand how to interpret your own dreams when you get them. So the next dream that we understand is Pharaoh's Dream. And again, it's the healthy cow, the unhealthy cow, and he has no idea. Then the butler says, "Oh yeah, there's this guy there," and so they rush him. I mean, as you read, it's really quick. They rush him out of prison, shave him really quickly, put him in a robe, get him cleaned up and presentable to Pharaoh. And this is the same thing with Daniel. He's able to interpret the dream. He's able to explain Pharaoh's dream to him. Now, this is another thing too. Pharaoh's not a member of the church, but he gets inspired dreams. People who are not members of the church get dreams and promptings, like Joan of Arc would be one that we'd consider that, but also the founding fathers in the United States of America. Not members, they don't hold the priesthood, but God's still using them and guiding them for his purposes. But you also need to have members of the Church of Joseph to interpret the dreams. And this is interesting. It's, for example, Joseph Smith talked about with interpreting dreams. He said, for example, flying signifies prosperity and deliverance, and I'm sorry, my handwriting's a little scrawly, and also swimming in deep water signifies success among many people. And I'll put the notes here in the bottom in the comments section, just so you can read them and cross-reference them. Another thing too about the Pharaoh's Dream is President Hinckley referenced it back in the October 1998 conference. It's I remember listening to it and thought, okay, this isn't really good. But President Hinckley says, look, you have times of prosperity and you have times of want or need. And when you're in times of prosperity, you build up a reserve. So you get out of debt and you have reserves. So when you're in those tight times, rainy days, you have a reserve you can fall back on. And when you think about that, he said that in 2008. What was it? 2008, 9, about 4 years later, you had 9/11. And then 10 years later, you had the recession of 2008. And for people who were paying attention to the prophet, you didn't have a whole lot of problems. And that's one thing I did is when I heard that, I got out of debt as quickly as possible. I wasn't completely out of debt, but at least I was heading the right direction. So when those things happen, I was able to manage it and I didn't have problems. And pay attention when the prophet tells you to stuff like that. But also as a general principle, you always save a portion, save about 10%. Take the amount you pay in tithing, take the same amount and put it into a savings account, and just be very aggressive with savings. So in case an emergency happens, you can fall back on it and you're not in a panic and you're not having to run stuff up on your credit card. And that's an important piece of wisdom to live with. And that's at least whatever you think of the Bible or whatever the atheists think of the Bible, at least you can agree upon that's a good principle to have, is to have that. So that covers most of it. So let's go to the Christ quotient section of this. First, like I said, this is, we're so familiar with Joseph, it becomes a little bit of like watching a rerun, but we can make the reruns enjoyable, like when you watch your favorite movie over and over again. So we talk about parallels between Joseph and Jesus Christ, going to prison, coming out of prison, the price, and also with parallels with Joseph Smith's time in prison, especially with Liberty Jail, how that was very transformative as it was for Joseph and also Jesus Christ. But put ourselves in the mix. How are you like Joseph? What type of dreams have you got? What do you do when you have prison experiences, or what B.H. Roberts called prison temple experiences? Are you allowing your the times that you're in prison, that you're underwater, to become transformative, as it were, for Jesus, for Joseph, and for Joseph Smith? The same thing can happen to you. Ooh, we're running a little bit over. Another thing to pay attention to is ministering to prisoners. Prisoners are people too. Joseph Smith was a prisoner. Jesus was a prisoner. Joseph of Egypt was also a prisoner. And we have an important responsibility to minister to prisoners. Marvin J. Ashton, an apostle of days gone by, had that as part of his personal ministry, was to visit people in prison. The last thing to think about that is, what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus Christ? You look at Joseph of Egypt's life, and that's what it means to follow Jesus Christ. And that's the point. Now, since you sat with me through the end of the video, yes, I have met Donny Osmond in person. It was one of those kind of funny accidents where he's in an elevator and I get in the same elevator. I had the same thing happen with Elder M. Russell Ballard. So for half a minute, I rode in an elevator with Donny Osmond. So that's my kind of connection. And I'm not a big fan of Joseph the Technicolor Dreamcoat. I respect the artistry. I just think the approach where you need to have go-go girls and jokes in there, I don't need that with scriptures. I don't need explosions and laser shows and T-shirts to feel the power of scripture. Just give it to me straightforward. And I am at 18:03, so I'm running over time. But thank you, and you're glad that you sat through so you heard my Donny Osmond story. Have a good day.